We want you to encounter the power, mystery, and supernatural nature of God.
How many of you have done something stupid? Have you done something stupid? Yeah, a few of you. Okay, great. Yeah, no elbows, just hands. All right, that's perfect. A few months ago, some extended family came to visit me from the middle of Ohio where I grew up. I think it's my second cousin, Chris, reminded me of one of those moments in my life. Allegedly, I suggested to Chris years ago when we were in high school that it would be funny if we drove around, stole people's election signs, and then put them at the Welcome to Belleville sign. Yeah, even saying it out loud now sounds dumb. Okay, I get it. But we got to work. I drove my Dodge 600, and he had an OG Ford Bronco. We drove around, and eventually, when our collection was complete, we met on the side of the road next to the Welcome to the Village of Belleville sign. And just as we were about to open up our trunk, a car pulls in behind his Bronco. A police car. It's like, what are you boys doing here? Now, at this point, I'm like, this is going to be bad, okay? And Chris kind of blurts out, well, I was having some car trouble, and Ben here is helping me out. Now, I am sure we look guilty, but ultimately, he lets us go, okay? And so if there are any police officers here, I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations is in effect. But when Chris told me this story, I was like, what was I thinking? Like, that was stupid. So if you've ever exercised poor judgment in your life, I want to welcome you to Cedar Creek this weekend, whatever campus you're at. Those of you watching online or on TV, it's a privilege to be able to spend some time with you. My name is Ben. If you're brand new, if this is your first time, I'm the lead pastor here. And each weekend, we have the opportunity to stream into Toledo Correctional, who are some of our honored guests, the men that are watching this weekend. So let's put our hands together to welcome those men and people watching online this weekend. Some of the stories of our past are stupid, and I think some of our stories we regret because they're shameful. And I think all of us have stories that we would love to erase. And one of the things that I love about the Bible, in fact, I think it surprises people, is the Bible is full of honest stories. Honest stories. And some of them are stupid, and some of them are unbelievable. Like if you've never read through the Bible on your own, there are some crazy moments in there with a vivid detail that might even make Vegas blush. That's right. So if you've never read it, it's an intense book, especially in the Old Testament. And so for the last few Halloween weekends, I like stepping into some of the more peculiar, you could say spooky or supernatural parts of the Old Testament to see how it applies to our life today. And so the story that we're going to look at takes place in the Jewish scriptures, which is what we call the Old Testament portion of our Bible today. It's like the first 2/3 of the Bible. They are originally and still to this day considered Jewish scriptures. And the story that we're going to look at is a story where God supernaturally shows up in the midst of an event. So if you're on the skeptical side, if you came with a friend or you're visiting with someone to experience Halloweekend, I'm so glad you're here. You can stay skeptical. Even if you don't believe this literally happened, here's what I would ask, is that you would be open to the principles that are talked about in the story. And for others of you, maybe you grew up in church, you're going to be familiar with this story. Maybe you heard it as a kid or as a part of like kids' church when you were younger. It may feel childish to you. And the challenge I want for you is to look at this story with fresh eyes and ask the question, God, what do you have for me today? The story takes place in the book of Daniel. If you are familiar with Daniel, Daniel has a handful of really fascinating stories. If you are not, half of Daniel's writing is his personal memoir of some significant events that happen while he is in captivity in Babylon. The other half are his dreams and visions that he believed God gave him about the future, okay? So his writings start with him as a young man, a teenager in Jerusalem, when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar surrounds Jerusalem, besieges the city. And after Nebuchadnezzar invades and defeats Jerusalem, to the victor goes the spoils. I mean, the custom of any victorious king would be to go in and take all of the valuable possessions and the sacred possessions back to your kingdom, to your idol, your God. You'd put them in the temple as a gift. So that's what Nebuchadnezzar did. He went into the Jewish temple and he took all of the golden cups and the silver plates and the lampstands and all of those precious sacred items, and he took them back to his temple in Babylon. Now, if you wanted to visit Babylon today, the ruins of this ancient city are in modern-day Iraq. In 600 BC, though, Babylon was magnificent. Archaeologists have learned that the Babylonians actually redirected the Euphrates River to run through the city, giving it an endless supply of water, which meant the city, as long as it wasn't invaded, was undefeatable. And excavations show that around the city was an 88-foot wide and some believe 100-foot tall city wall. 88 feet wide. That means 2 chariots could run side by side along the exterior perimeter. It felt like an impenetrable fortress, which is one of the reasons why Babylon became kind of the center of the world in strength, in smarts, and in the arts. I mean, one of the defining features of the ancient Babylonian city was the glazed blue tiles they would use to decorate walls inside and out. This is a reconstruction of the Ishtar Gate, blue and gold. We would be in awe if you were to visit the original city of Babylon today. So, after Nebuchadnezzar invaded Jerusalem, not only did he bring back the gold and the silver, he also decided to bring back some of the best and brightest young men from Jerusalem. And one of those individuals he brought back, his name was Daniel. And so Daniel served on the king's court. Daniel was taught about Babylonian culture. And he committed himself in the midst of this to stay faithful to the God of Israel. And so God used him in some pretty significant ways. He used his influence. If you're familiar with the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel writes about that story where they wouldn't bow down to the idol made in the image of Nebuchadnezzar, so he threw them into the fiery furnace and God protected them. At one point, King Nebuchadnezzar professed himself to be God over all. Like there was nobody more powerful than him. And so what happened? He had some dreams that he couldn't understand, and Daniel told him, because of your pride, God's going to humble you, and you're going to live like a wild animal. And he did for 7 years. And eventually, when he recovered, and when he was restored as king, here's what he said. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and glorify and honor the King of heaven. All of his acts are just and true, and he is able to humble the proud. This is a pretty profound confession from a king, especially from a king who demanded people worship him as a god. Now he is like, the God of Israel, the King of heaven, is God over all. And man, do I know, because he has humbled the proud. I mean, because of Daniel's influence, Daniel had incredible influence among the kings of Babylon, starting with Nebuchadnezzar, but also with that guy, Marduk, Marduk, and then Neriglissar. You want to say that one? I don't. Okay. And this one even gets more difficult. Nabonidus, all the way to Belshazzar. Belshazzar is the king that's the kind of the background for our story today, really the main character. In Daniel chapter 5, you can follow along if you brought a Bible, or I'll put the verses up here. It says, many years later, King Belshazzar gave a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles, and he drank wine with them. This is 23 years after Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel is now in his 80s, and Belshazzar is the co-regent king, meaning like there are 2 kings. Nabonidus, his father, is still alive, and he's off traveling while Belshazzar is kind of in charge of Babylon, okay? And so he decides to throw a huge party for 1,000 men, which if you like think about what does it take to feed 1,000 men, let's just assume 1,000 pounds of meat then. I mean, entire herds slaughtered in one night to feed or to prepare for this party. Probably over 1,000 bottles of wine. I asked ChatGPT to give me a visual of what this may have looked like in the Babylonian area. Keep in mind they didn't have electricity, and so this was the VIP of all VIP parties. Thousands of men, and the smell of roasted meat and sweat and wine and the smoke from the lanterns along the wall filled this blue-tiled banquet hall. Dancers spinning wildly to the music that was being played. Now, history tells us that at about this time, Cyrus the Great and the Persians and the Medes were threatening an attack. Potentially, they had even besieged or surrounded the city. But Belshazzar, he didn't care. I mean, Some historians felt like the Babylonians thought they had enough supplies to last them 20 years if somebody surrounded the city. They felt fine. So even though there may be a few people whispering in the kingdom, what are people doing outside of the wall? The king was like, we're going to have a good time. That's what we're going to do. And he wanted to remind everybody of his prosperity, his power, his prestige. So while Belshazzar was drinking the wine, he gave orders to bring out the gold and silver cups that his predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. He wanted to drink from them with his nobles, his wives, and his concubines. These weren't just any cups. These were the sacred gold and silver vessels stolen from the temple. These are objects that were dedicated to worshiping God. That's it. But to Belshazzar, they're trophies. They're just another way for him to brag, to mock the Israelites, to flex his power. So the servants came in. The crowd roared with approval. And while they drank from the glasses, they praised their idols made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. I mean, the kings, the nobles, they were basically toasting their own greatness. They praised these man-made gods using the same cups used to worship the God who made them all. But they were drunk. They were having a good time. They were daring heaven to respond. And so God did. Suddenly, they saw the fingers of a human hand writing on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace near the lampstand. I mean, everyone's enjoying great dinner. And suddenly, Thing from the Addams Family shows up. You know, it's like, can you imagine? Could you imagine being there? A severed human hand showing up, no body, no face, no sound, fingers flexing, tendons moving, marking the wall with some cryptic message. Very superstitious. The writings on the wall. I mean, that's where that phrase actually comes from this story, the one that we use today. And you know, you can kind of laugh about it now, but if you were to be there, it would be scary. In fact, the king himself saw the hand as it wrote, and his face turned pale with fright, and his knees knocked together in fear, and his legs gave way beneath him. The most powerful man on earth crumpled like a terrified child. I mean, somebody was sending a message, and even though no one was quite sure what it meant, it was clear that whatever the message was, it wasn't good. So, the king shouted for the enchanters, the astrologers, and the fortune tellers, the most intelligent and spiritual advisors on his court, to be brought before him. He said to these wise men of Babylon, whoever can read this writing and tell me what it means will be dressed in purple robes of royal honor, will have a gold chain placed around his neck. He will become the third highest ruler in the kingdom. The third highest, his dad, him, and then number 3, right? And when all the king's wise men had come in, none of them could read the writing or tell him what it meant. And so the king grew even more alarmed. His face turned even more pale, and his nobles too were shaken. The party had turned to panic. No one breathed. Musicians froze. Dancers moved into the shadows. No one even dared whisper. And eventually, Belshazzar's mother finds out. When the queen mother heard what was happening, she hurried to the banquet hall. She said to Belshazzar, "Long live the king. Don't be so pale. Don't be so frightened. There's a man in your kingdom who has within him the spirit of the holy gods. This man, Daniel, he has exceptional ability and is filled with divine knowledge and understanding. He can interpret dreams and explain riddles and solve difficult problems." So they call for Daniel. And the king offers him the same wardrobe, gold chain, royal position, third highest position in the kingdom behind him and his father. So if you can imagine Daniel in front of 1,000 of the most influential people, this is what he starts to say. Daniel answered the king, "Keep your gifts, give them to someone else. Like, I don't care about this stuff, but I will tell you what the writing means." Could you imagine saying this? He says, "Your Majesty, the Most High God gave sovereignty, majesty, and glory and honor to your predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar." He doesn't start with the message on the wall. He retells the history of Nebuchadnezzar and how he was so proud of how big and powerful he was that God humbled him. And he retold the story of how Nebuchadnezzar lived like an animal for 7 years. And then when God restored him, Nebuchadnezzar professed the God of Israel to be God over all of the kings and kingdoms of the earth. Like most of the people in the room knew the story. It was only 20 years ago. Belshazzar would have been about 20 years old. He would have witnessed this. And then he turned to the king and he said, "You are his successor, O Belshazzar, and you knew all of this, and yet you have not humbled yourself. For you have proudly defied the Lord of heaven, and you've placed these cups from his temple brought before you. You and your nobles and your wives and your concubines have been drinking wine from them while praising the gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, gods that neither see nor hear nor know anything at all. But you have not honored the God who gives you the breath of life and controls your destiny." And so God sent this hand to write this message. This is the message that was written. Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. Now here's the thing. Everybody knew the words on the wall. It was written in Aramaic. This is why I think the hand itself had to be so frightening, because they knew the words, but when they saw the hand, they probably stayed there, pointing to the message on the wall. They knew it meant something frightening. And so Daniel begins to fill in the gaps. Mene means numbered. God has numbered the days of your reign, and he's brought it to an end. Tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the balances, and you have not measured up. And Parsin means divided. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. See, what they didn't know during this banquet, and what some historians believe happened, is that the Persians and the Medes had found a way to redirect the Euphrates River, which was going to enable them to enter the city underneath the city wall on the riverbed. What Daniel records is that very night, Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, was killed. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. I don't know about you, but I think somebody should make a movie out of this. I mean, it'd be pretty fun to watch. I mean, Mike Flanagan, I would love to see what he could do with something like this. How eerie and spooky he could make it. The question, though, is what does this story have to do with us? Well, Belshazzar thought he was untouchable. And he lived as though his life was his to control. I think if we're honest, we all live like that sometimes, don't we? So even though this ancient story for an arrogant ancient king exists, I'm wondering if the same writing is on the wall for us today. Like, your days are numbered. Your life will be weighed. Your kingdom will be divided. I mean, when you hear that, it's heavy. But I got good news. It's not hopeless. Yes, it feels like God is confronting us, but not to condemn us, but to wake us up, to help lead us to life. And so I would love for you to consider all three. First, your days are numbered. This is a reminder of the brevity of life. We forget that our days are numbered until you get a phone call that you didn't expect or a diagnosis. I know some of you are facing this right now, and you know this. You're feeling this to be true. But most of the time, we don't like thinking about it. But ignoring it won't make it go away. Every breath that you take is a gift, not a guarantee. That's why there are prayers in the Bible that remind us of this, like Psalm 39 that said, "Lord, remind me how brief my time on earth will be. Remind me that my days are numbered, how fleeting my life is. You've made my life no longer than the width of my hand. My entire lifetime is just a moment to you. At best, each of us is but a breath." Friends, your days, our days are numbered. And the truth is, you may not be able to control the number of your days, but you can choose what you will do with them. And even though you can't see your future, and even though no matter how hard you try, you cannot control your life, there is one who sees and is sovereign over it all. In Psalm 139, the prayer goes, "You, God, saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed." That's God. He sees it all. And so the choice that we're invited to make is we can either trust God with our life because he has it all, or we can try to do life on our own. We can either trust the Most High God, the God over it all, knows what's best for us, and so we're going to trust his way of life, or we can live like Belshazzar and try to live as though we are in charge and do whatever we want. And here's the thing. When things are going well and the wine is flowing, this feels great. But today, the writing's on the wall. Your days are numbered. And not only that, your life will be weighed. This is a statement of judgment, like scales. Scales used to weigh the good versus the bad. This is why you see scales used in courtroom symbols. Evidence, guilty, innocent. Belshazzar's life was weighed and he didn't measure up. And you might look at him and be like, serves him right. I mean, he should have known better. These were objects taken from the temple. Like, come on, man, what was he thinking? Well, let me ask you, how will your life measure up? Because the Bible says everyone has sinned. Not some of us. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. And what this is telling us is we're no better than him. This is actually one of the sobering truths of the Bible. And we try to convince ourselves, well, I don't know that that verse is really speaking about me. Well, what do you think it takes to measure up to God's glorious standard? Like, God doesn't grade on a curve, which means better than most still falls short of his glorious standard. So the truth is, you can't do enough to measure up to his glorious standard. You can't do enough to earn your way to heaven or to earn more of God's blessing in your life. In fact, to think that you can measure up to his glorious standard is to overestimate your ability, which is pride. And it grossly underestimates his holiness. When you're really honest about it, that's where we're at. In many ways, we are just like Belshazzar. We think we are better than we are, and we don't realize how holy he is. What was Belshazzar's sin? Idolatry, which is the violation of the first two of the 10 commandments, if you know what those are. And I think we're guilty of the same thing. I love how one of the church fathers, Augustine of Hippo, defined idolatry. Idolatry is worshiping something that should be used, gold, iron, stone, wood, or using something that should be worshiped, the cups and the plates that were used to worship God. For you and me today, anything that takes the place of God in your life. It could be something you want, it could be something you do, it could be something that you have. If it takes the place of God, it's idolatry. Or when we try to use God or spiritual practices to get from God what we want. And so we pray more and we go to church more and we try to do more good, because if we do that, maybe God will owe us. That is also idolatry. Essentially no different than Belshazzar, praising gods of gold, silver, wood, and stone. Friends, our days are numbered. Our life will be weighed, which, when you think about what we're capable of, explains why our kingdom will be divided. In the original language, that word divided is broken in two. Your life, the life that you build, will crumble if it's only built on you. When self is the foundation or the focus, collapse is inevitable. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, Ben, you don't know me. Like, life's going pretty good right now. I don't really need God in my life. I'm doing okay. Well, I'd love to introduce you to somebody who thought the same thing. Belshazzar. He thought he had it all. He thought he was in control. He was convinced there wasn't a real threat. And when we think we are in control, we forget that our days are numbered, that our life will be weighed, that we're not as in control as we would like to think. I mean, the other thing that Belshazzar didn't really realize, he underestimated the enemy outside. And I think sometimes we underestimate what a little crack in our character can lead to. It can lead to an invasion of chaos. I mean, all I've got to say are names like Tiger Woods and Will Smith, and you could probably think of a dozen more. People who at the top of their game, a crack in their character, caused an incredible downfall. Like, what temptation or struggle is threatening you right outside the walls of your life? See, when we think we've got it, that's pride. It was Belshazzar's pride that costed him. He knew better. Like, he had witnessed Nebuchadnezzar, and yet he lived life as if it was on his terms, and it cost him everything. So, if we were to stop here, we would be Belshazzar too. Guilty, weighed, and found wanting. But our story doesn't stop here. Your story doesn't stop with your stupid choices, your sin, your regret. God actually offers a new word for our lives. In fact, James, the brother of Jesus, quoting an Old Testament passage, says that God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. God opposes the proud. Pride is this inward belief that I know what's best, I deserve what's best, and I can do what's best for my life. I don't need God. Pride puts self at the center, at the top, which means God and everyone else is underneath. That is what God opposes. Not because he opposes you, but because he's opposed to what will ruin your life. See, God doesn't want to oppose us. What does he want to do? He wants to give grace to the humble. Do you know what the meaning of grace is? It's a gift. You can't earn it. It's not a paycheck for your labor. It's undeserved. It's what Jesus came to offer each of us. Forgiveness for our sin, for our regrets and our stupid choices by dying on the cross, and new life with him because he came back from the dead. He knows that our days are numbered. And so instead of being crushed by the fact that our days are numbered and our life will be weighed, Jesus gives us an opportunity to experience something new and eternal with him. And there are many passages in the Bible that talk about this, but I love the way that it's written in Colossians. It said, "For he, God," referring to God, "has rescued us from the kingdom of darkness, and he's transferred us into the kingdom of his dear Son, who purchased our freedom and forgave our sins." So you could insert the word life for kingdom. For God has rescued us from the life of darkness, and he's transferred us into the life of his dear Son, who purchased our freedom and forgave our sins through his death, burial, and resurrection. Like, how do we experience this new life? Not by earning it, not by proving to God that you're worth, but by humbly. He gives grace to the humble. It's when we go, God, I realize my days are numbered, my life is weighed. Like, I got no shot if you don't come and save me. It takes humility to confess that and to receive the forgiveness that Jesus purchased. See, with Jesus, our sin and our inadequacy does not get the last word. He does. So even though our days are numbered, and even though our life will be weighed, your future can be secure through Jesus. Maybe you're sitting there today like, man, I've always just thought of Christianity as a list of rules that you follow. It's not. It's a posture of humility, receiving the grace that Jesus offers. And if you can't think of a moment in your life when you placed your faith in Christ, I wonder if he brought you here today to hear this simple message, to put a writing of hope on the wall for you. Like, if you can't think of a time when you've surrendered your life to him in the quietness of your heart, wherever you're watching, just make that your prayer right now. If you're not ready, just stay curious. Come back next week. Join us for At the Movies. We'd love to journey with you. You're welcome here. But if you feel like you need that forgiveness and grace, that you've been buried by a past of guilt or the pressure of your days being numbered, then tell God right now in the quietness of your heart, I want to surrender my life to you. I want to receive the gracious gift of forgiveness and new life that Jesus offers. And I want to follow you from this day forward. Make that your prayer. And if you do, would you tell us? Would you scan the QR code in the seat around you and just say, I made a decision to follow Jesus. Make today your spiritual birthday, the start of your life-changing adventure with him. We would love to celebrate with you. For those of you that follow Jesus, may you never forget God's grace. Let it shape the humility that you live with every day of your life. And one of the ways to help our hearts connect with that truth is through music. It's to sing. And so as our team in a moment will invite you to sing, I want you to remember, yes, life is short and eternity is forever, but your life can be secure with Jesus. So let's take him at his word.